Y'all stand up. Y'all sing with me. Y'all sing loud. Lord, the light of your love is shining in the midst of your darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with your Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light. Lord, we come in your awesome presence, from the shadows into your radiance. By the blood I may enter your brightness. Search me, try me, consume all my darkness. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with your Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light. Last verse, here we go. As we gaze on your kindly brightness, so our faces display your likeness, ever changing from glory to glory. Nearer here by the light, tell your story. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with your Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light. Are you glad you're here this morning? Amen. We're going to let this all play on out. We're going to do another one. After this next one, just join me on the piano. Hey, Ella. How many of you need the light every day to follow? His word will get you there. Y'all sing with me. Here we go. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. When I feel afraid and I think I've lost my way, still you're there right beside me. Nothing will I fear as long as you are near. Please be with me to the end. Oh, thy word is a lamp to my feet and a light unto my path. Oh, thy word is a lamp
don't know if I can preach or not after all that slow, draggy music. I'm worn out, just to be honest with you. I don't know if I got any voice left. I hadn't heard singing like that, and I hadn't sung like that in a long, long time. Man, I felt like I was a boy again. The way churches used to sing and worship. Well, I enjoyed that. Man, those lights are bright. You can cut those down if you want to, whoever's got the ability to do it. Man, that's bright. I feel like I'm I won't tell y'all. I'll tell you. I better get a drink of this water. Back when I was in high school, I played in a little rock and roll band. Back then, I'd have thought those lights were cool, but yeah, I was hoping to be in the lights back then. But anyway, yep, we were big time. We got, let's see, the most we ever made was $25 a piece playing one night. We thought we were in the money. But anyway, if you got your Bibles with you, open them to Romans chapter 1. Go back like it was. That's good with me right there. Y'all can see me, can't you? Yeah, something like that. That's a little better. That's a little better. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. Now if I can get used to this thing hanging around my ear and pulling on the back of my neck. This is I know these, the sound-wise are better, but they're my least favorite. They get caught behind your shirt back there and all that, and you turn your neck and the slack's pulled out and it jerks you back. I remember when I'm a preacher's kid. Let me see what time it is. My wife said, she's at our home church over the road here, and she said, now listen, don't you get to reminiscing and not have time to preach. But this is my first time to be here, and for far as I know, it might be my last, so I better get all in, and I'm retired. What you going to do, fire me? I don't know. My daddy was a preacher. We were talking about those old times back then, and I can remember before air conditioning, and some of y'all can too. I can tell by looking at you, and the windows went up on the side. You know, now they don't raise up, but and it would be hot in the summertime. They always had revival in the summertime. You remember that? Why didn't they do it in the early spring or the fall or something like that when it was cool? But I always had it in the hottest part of the year, like August or something. To have those revivals, but we were talking about the length of a sermon, you know, and back in those days, for my daddy, 45 minutes was a short sermon, you know, and talking about the coat and tie. Now, back then, that was your uniform if you was a preacher, right? My daddy always wore a dark suit, white shirt, long sleeve, sometimes often French cuffs. He loved those French cuffs, and a dark tie. That was kind of your uniform. It didn't matter how hot it got, even in the summertime without the air conditioning, you wore that. And when I was a little kid, I remember this and talking about the tie. About halfway through the sermon, my daddy would take his coat off. And you knew, however long you'd been preaching, that was just about halfway through. And it was like, thank you, Jesus. He took his coat off finally. You know what I mean? I'm gonna whack that guy back there. But anyway, but here's the thing: you also got to say, thank you, Lord, and then say, oh Lord, please don't let him roll his sleeves up. Because if he loosened that tie and rolled his sleeves up, it was like starting all over again. And really. So anyway, I can remember those good old times, and I love to do that. That good singing made me think of some of those good times when people used to really sing. Now in a lot of churches, the congregation is just sort of the audience, and what's going on up here is the show, and they don't participate. Y'all participate. You even talk back. And with me, that's okay. That's okay. It really is. I enjoy that, and sometimes I'll ask you to talk back. So if you're not sure about the last church I pastored, I was a director of missions for 22 and a half years. Took them a long time to run me off. I'm stubborn. But in my last church, they would say, well, sometimes we don't know. You'll ask a question, and we don't know whether to answer out loud or not. And and so one day I came to the pulpit. I guess I did it one time too much. I came to the pulpit, and there was these two signs. You know those funeral home fans? Well, they had put white paper on the sides of those, glued them on there, I guess, those funeral home fans. And then one of them said respond, and the other one said don't respond. They said, if you'll just hold those up, then we'll know what we're supposed to do. Yeah, one of those smart aleck deacons did that. I know. Probably the one I just got back from the beach with one of my deacons back in those days. Now that's something that I'm still on speaking terms with one of my former deacons, and he even invited me to go to the beach with him. But anyway, he was probably the one that did that. By the way, I like deacons. I used to be one. So half of my brain is the deacon brain, the other half is the preacher brain, and those two together help keep me out of trouble. So anyway, and my wife would say, get on with it. So Romans chapter 1. I've enjoyed myself this morning, and it's showing. So thank you, Brother Doug, and thank you for singing like you meant it, and not dragging it, Some of those songs, if you sing it in slow motion, just doesn't have the same effect, It just doesn't say it just doesn't have the same effect. Romans chapter 1, and I'll try and hurry now. Romans chapter 1, well, not really, but Romans chapter 1. Paul is writing to the church at Rome. Now, this is a unique church. Most of, or at least the ones that we know of, there may have been some other churches that maybe we don't have a record of. That's possible. But the churches we know of, Paul either founded or participated in the founding and the starting of those churches and was heavily involved in those churches, in planting those churches and getting them going and all of that. He had an ongoing relationship with those churches. But this church at Rome was different. Paul didn't found this church. He didn't help start this church. Paul had never visited this church. He had never physically met these people. And so Romans is unique in that way. It opens up with the normal greetings and all of that. But I want to pick up in verse 8. This gets to the crux, the heart of what Romans is all about. And it begins in verse 8, and it says, first, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers, making request, if by any means now at length I might have a prosperous journey by the will of God to come unto you. For I long to see you, that I may impart, or in other words, give unto you some spiritual gift, to the end that you may be established or strengthened or encouraged. Verse 12, that is, that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. Now, I would not have you ignorant, and he's not calling them dumb there. That word can also translate unaware. I just want you to know what's going on. I don't want you to be unaware. I would not have you ignorant or unaware, brethren, that oftentimes I proposed or planned to come unto you. And in the King James Version, in parentheses, it says, but was let hitherto. That means I've made my plans, but, they fell through every time. Something's come up, and I haven't been able to get to you. But here's the purpose, that I might have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. Paul's called the apostle to the Gentiles. And he's been with these others. He's had fruit among these others, and now he desires to have fruit among this church at Rome as well. Now, the sermon title this morning is in the form of a question. And I don't want you to answer this one out loud, okay? This is a rhetorical question. And in fact, don't even try to answer it to yourself yet. I want you to really think about it. I want to challenge you with it. And let's together, let's really struggle with it just a little bit, okay? It'd be too easy to give that quick answer. And if I said, Aunt, tell me, and went down the road like that, you'd say what everybody else, expected you to say, right? Right? I don't want you to do that. I want you to be honest, brutally honest this morning. I want you to think about this question. I want you to think about it this whole week. Don't answer out loud. Here's the question. What in the world are you doing here this morning? Why do you come to church ever? Now, some of you, this is where you are on Sunday morning. This is your habit. That's not a bad habit to have. Now, if you come just out of habit, that's not quite good enough, but it is a good habit to have. And this is who you are. This is what you do. Now, it'd be a good Sunday to be out. I've never been here, so if you were out, I wouldn't know it. There's some out right now, and I don't know they're out because I don't know them. Now, you ask me back one more time, and I'll know who you are because I'm good with faces. And I'll know where you are, and most of you will sit in the same place next time, next Sunday. If I were here, I'd know it. I would know this one's out and that one's out. I'd know that. So if y'all invite me back, you better show up. But I wouldn't know that. So, this would be a good opportunity. I think Brother Kevin's been here a couple of times, and now, see, he may know some of you anyway, so he'd miss you. I wouldn't miss you. This is a great opportunity to be somewhere else and do something else, sleep in this morning. But you're here. You're here. Some of you come back on Wednesday night. Some of you are involved in everything going on in this church. You're here. You're a part of it. It's who you are. It's what you do. It's in your DNA. That's you. That's you. My question is, why? Why? Why do we do this? Why do we come to church and do church and all that means and all that involves? Now, to help us answer that question, we want to raise another question right along beside that. And that question is for the Apostle Paul, and it's simply this. Paul, why did you desire to go to Rome? He said, I long to go to Rome. We're going to talk about that. Why did Paul desire to go to Rome? If we can find the answers to that question, then I believe we got the right answers to why you and I do what we do in church, why we come to church. So are you with me? Say yes, because I don't want to do that all over again. We're raising this question over here, why did he come to church? But we're also raising a question over here, why did Paul desire to go to Rome? Because these answers are the right answers for this question. Does that make sense? Are you ready to do it? All right. Why do you come to church? Paul, why did you desire to go to Rome? Paul desired to go to Rome, number one, in order to give something. In order to give something. Look at verse 11. For I long to see you, that I may impart or give unto you some spiritual gift, to the end you may be established. He starts that verse by saying, I long to see you. Now let's understand the depth of that word, long. I long to be with you. When I was 19 years old, I had just gotten married. I'm from Walker County. You can get married when you're 12 in Walker County, but sometimes somebody will say, how old were y'all when you got married? And I said, my wife was 19 and I was 12. That's legal in Walker County, but she doesn't think that's funny one bit. But I was 19 years old, just got married. We got married in January the 7th, and the end of January, I got on a bus in Jasper, Alabama, and came to Gunter Air Force Base to have my physical to join the United States Air Force. The Army was about to draft me, and in fact, I joined down here, and a couple of days after I got home, I got a draft notice from the Army, and I called my recruiter, my Air Force recruiter. He said, "Don't worry about it," and I said, "Whoo!" I was glad, because I thought the Air Force would be a little bit easier. I got on that bus. We were newlyweds, and listen, we dated for 3 years before we got married. The last thing her mom and daddy did before they turned out the lights, they didn't lock the doors back then, but before they turned out the lights was to send me home, okay? So we were together, just as constantly. Then we've been married for a few weeks. I got on that bus. We didn't get out of sight of Jasper, Alabama. I didn't get out of the city limits till I started missing her. I missed that ponytail and those skinny little legs. I just missed her with everything. We got down to Montgomery to the bus station down there, and the recruiter giving me a voucher because I got on the bus that afternoon. I don't know why we didn't leave in the morning, but we got down there and it was late. By the time I got out to Gunter, there wasn't going to be anything open to eat, and they gave me a voucher to eat at the bus station. And I got off there, and there's a guy over there on one of those flat top grills, and he was cooking those big, fat, juicy burgers on that thing, the grease running out everywhere, and he was fixing those up. I went over my voucher because I was hungry, and I ordered one, and he put that thing on there with cheese, mustard, ketchup, and pickles. And he laid that in front of me. Man, I was starving. He laid that in front of me, and I took one big old bite, and I set it down, and I didn't want any more of it. Just suddenly, I lost my appetite. Because I didn't have an appetite for that hamburger. I wanted my sweetheart. I longed to see her. It physically affected me. Well, that was just a taste of what was to come because they swore me in. A couple of months later, I went in for basic training, came home for a few weeks, and then I went to the Philippine Islands. That'll bless your heart. I tell you, I know what it's like to want to be with someone, and some of you have similar stories. You know what it's like to want to be with someone so much that it affects you physically, emotionally, and physically. You're aching to be with them. Paul's saying, I want to see you so bad, I want to be with you so bad that I'm aching. I'm aching. It hurts. I want to be with you so much. I'm aching, I'm hurting to be with you. Now listen, it's not unusual, it's not a surprise that somebody might miss their sweetheart so much that they would be aching to be with them. But this is kind of interesting to me, and that's because Paul had never met those people. I dated my wife for 3 years. I could tell you that. I'll tell you that story if you invite me back sometime. It's a good one. It's a good one. Love at first sight on her part, but it was a good one. But that's understandable. But he had never met these people. He knew about them, but he had never shaken their hand. He'd never hugged their neck. He'd never had banana pudding in their house. He didn't know. He had never spent any time with them. But he wanted to be with them so bad it did hurt. The only answer I have for that is that is unconditional, genuine Christian love. And genuine Christian love always produces a giving attitude. Back to the point. Genuine Christian love always produces a giving attitude. Paul desired to go to Rome to give them something. I long to see you that I may impart, give unto you some spiritual gift. Now, that tells us about the nature of the gift, but it doesn't get into specifics. It's spiritual in nature. Beyond that, we really don't know, but he does tell us the purpose. Here's the goal. To the end, you may be established. In other words, strengthened or encouraged. So Paul desired to go to Rome I think, to just give of himself, to pour his life into their life, that it might encourage and strengthen them. How refreshing it is to see someone that wants to go and be in church because of what they can give. A lot of people today shop around for churches based on what they can get out of it, not what they can put into it. And they'll go to a church and they'll get settled in and all that kind of stuff. And then a church down the road will come up with something new, a new shiny object, and they'll run down there for that. And then when they get used to that and somebody else starts another, got another shiny object, they'll run down to that. They just hop to church based on what that church can do for them. Was it President Kennedy, didn't he famously say, remember the speech, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country? That ought to be our attitude when it comes to church. Not what the church can do for me. Listen, I'm all for programs. We ought to minister to folks. I'm not saying that. I'm all for that. But our attitude ought to be, what can I do for my church? Why do you come? Why do you come to church? Well, Paul, why did you desire to go to Rome? He desired to go to Rome in order to give something, but he also desired to go to Rome in order to get something. Now, you're probably sitting there saying, he's now about to contradict everything he just said. No. That was not Paul's primary goal, but Paul understood this principle. When you are a blessing, you receive a blessing. How many of you have ever been on a mission trip or you've done some kind of mission project, ministry project in the neighborhood, and the goal is to go out and bless others, and you come back and say, I got a bigger blessing than they did. I've been on mission trips with people, and you come back and say, I got a bigger blessing than they did. They blessed me. Paul understood that principle. When we are a blessing, we're naturally going to receive a blessing. We don't give to get, but we understand that when we're a blessing, we will be blessed in return. Something interesting about Paul, I wish y'all hadn't sung so enthusiastically. I was sitting there thinking, I'm going to wear my voice out singing, but it sure is fun. I don't care. Paul was just as ready to receive as he was to give. Now, some people have a hard time with that. I call them fixers. Some of y'all are one of them, right? A lot of daddies are fixers, especially if you got girls. Now, we don't worry too much about the boys, but, the girls, we got to fix it. And sometimes we run into things, experiences in our life with our children and our little girls, especially when they get grown, we can't fix. We may all have a story like that. But sometimes givers have a hard time receiving. Give and give and give, but it's just awkward when you try to help them or do something for them. You probably know something like that. Paul was ready to do both. Then you got those folks that if they're leading, if they're in charge, here I am, I'll be the leader, but if it's a matter of following, they don't want any part of that. They don't want any part of that. Paul was ready to do both. Paul could lead, Paul could follow, Paul could bless, Paul could be blessed. He was ready either way. Now that's quite interesting to me when you consider who Paul was. Paul was formerly Saul the Pharisee. We know his story. And as a Pharisee, Paul had the benefit of the finest theological education you could have in that day. He would have been a PhD today. Probably, a PhD from Harvard or somewhere like that, some big-time school. He was the person that God used to pen the majority of the New Testament. Paul wasn't a slouch. Paul was a great man with very few equals, if any, other than the Lord himself. Obviously, he could be a blessing to those folks. But he expected them to bless him. Now, who were they? These are brand new Christians. Babes in Christ. They still had their spiritual diapers on, but yet Paul expected to receive a blessing from them. Now, I don't know exactly what it was. Maybe it's just the enthusiasm that young Christians have. You've been around young Christians, right? New Christians. I don't mean necessarily young in age, but a new Christian. They'll embarrass the daylights out of you. They're crazy. You go to a restaurant, first of all, let's go to lunch. You're thinking, not with you. Because you're going to witness to the waitress. And you're not going to whisper. And everybody in the restaurant's going to hear it. And I'm going to be so embarrassed, I want to crawl under the table. You Christians are like that. They don't care. They don't mind everybody knowing they're a Christian. They want everybody to know they're a Christian. We're kind of, us more mature Christians, we're kind of discreet about it. Well, I don't act like a fool, I don't want to, They don't care. They'll act like a fool. Maybe it was just the enthusiasm of new Christians that Paul wanted to sort of be around and soak in. I don't know, but he was ready to receive whatever that blessing might be. He was ready to give a blessing and to receive a blessing as well. Now, there's a lesson in that for us, and it is this. I don't care if you've been a Christian for 50 days or 50 years. I don't care if you're the youngest Christian in age or the oldest Christian in age. I don't care if you're the best educated Christian in this church or the least educated. I don't care if you're the most wealthy person in this church or the least wealthy person in this church. I don't care who you are, who you think you are. Did you catch that? A lot of people think they're a lot more highly of themselves than they should. I don't care who you are, who you think you are. Every one of us can be a blessing and receive a blessing from every other one of us, but that will require a humble spirit and a cooperative attitude on the part of all of us. If I got time to preach, yeah, I got to. I'll tell this. I was trying to decide where to put this in or leave it out. I'm going to put it in. There was a group of biologists several years ago. I read this in an article. I don't remember even where I read it. A lot of times y'all read stuff at doctor's office or whatever. I'm reading a magazine, and I'll say, oh, man, that's good. And I'll look around, and if I'm afraid somebody will see me tear it out, I'll just make some notes. But I read this article, and a group of biologists from all over the country gathered together to study the habits of migratory birds. And they broke them up into smaller groups to study specific birds. And one group was assigned to study geese and their migratory habits. Now, if the children were in here, I could say, you know how geese fly? And they'd say in a V formation. The kids get it. They do, right? Do y'all understand that too? In a V formation. Why do they do that? Because they think it looks cool. Let's show those humans how cool we are. There's a reason for that. I don't know if they followed them in helicopters, airplanes. I don't know how they found all this out, but that study revealed that flying in the V formation, what they were doing. Any stock car people here? No, they're at the race, right? That's what it's not here. Well, I don't know a lot about stock cars, but I do know that there's something that they employ in stock car racing called drafting. That's when you get right up on the bumper of that car in front of you and you just stay there. Lap after lap after lap. I used to think, why don't they pass? Wait till the last lap and then they slingshot around there and pass them in the race. I was like, why didn't they do that a long time ago? They don't want to. Because the wind currents from the car in front is pulling along. If you get right up on their bumper, it's pulling along that car behind them. So they're saving wear and tear on the tire. Their motor's not running as hard or as hot. They're saving gas. I mean, that's a strategy. That's what those geese are doing. If you follow them long enough, you'll see that old lead goose, he'll drop off to the back. And he's just coasting along, because he'd been pulled along by the rest of them. And after a while, that one will go to the back and they'll all move up one place. And they're constantly changing places in that formation, one leading, dropping off, they all move up. And by doing that, by cooperating together, they discovered that geese can go, 73% further with 51% less effort than one old goose flying all by himself. You know what that means? Geese are smarter than Baptists. You know that old expression, you don't have the sense God gave a goose? Whoever came up with that was talking about us. Because we don't act like geese, we act like quail. Any bird hunters in here? You scare up a covey of quail, what do? They don't form up in a V. They scatter. Looks just like a Baptist church. The men's ministry, they're off over here. The women, they're off over there. Children, they're off over there. The youth don't know where they are. They're going somewhere. Senior adults, everybody's going in a different direction. They're doing good things, but they're not accomplishing anything. It's every man for himself. And you can have a church full of people doing a lot of good things, but if we're not coordinating and working together, we'll work ourselves to death and not really accomplish very much. It's kind of like putting a team of horses on both ends of a wagon and yelling, "Giddy up." I mean, listen, they'll both pull with all their might. They'll cause a commotion. They'll stir up a lot of dust, but they're not going anywhere. And eventually you wear out good horses and tear up a good wagon. And sadly, that's what's happened in a lot of churches. If we could get on the same end of that wagon, headed in the same direction, working together, we could accomplish a whole lot more and not wear ourselves out. Thank you. Because that's just, several years ago, it wasn't exactly this same sermon, but it was about cooperation, and I gave that analogy. A little 6-year-old boy going out the door, shaking hands, he'd go out the door, and he handed me this picture, and he had drawn a wagon with 2 horses on the end, each end, and a crack right down the middle of that wagon. That 6-year-old boy got it. I don't know if anybody else did. A humble spirit and a cooperative attitude. Do we have that? Why do you come to church? Well, to answer that, we're looking at another question. That is, Paul, why did you desire to go to Rome? He desired to go to Rome, number one, in order to give something. He literally wanted to invest his life in their life for the glory of God, to build them up and to strengthen them for the glory of God. He desired to go to Rome because he understood this principle. If I am a blessing, I'll receive a blessing. Now, I'm not talking about this TV preacher stuff. You send me 1,000, God will give you 10. Baloney. Don't you send him 10. If you got $10,000 or 1,000, send me 1,000, you'll get 10. If you got $1,000, put it right here. The tithe belongs in the storehouse. I mean, he doesn't need another multi-million-dollar mansion and another airplane and a $100 and whatever, $200 and whatever $1,000 car, an automobile, or another home in another place, another summer home or whatever. Send it to the church. I'm not talking about that kind of thing, giving out of greed, because if I give this, God's got to bless me. God ain't got to bless nobody. Bad English, but it sure is true. God doesn't have to do anything. We're not talking about that. We're talking about understanding that if I am a blessing, if my motives are pure, that I will naturally receive a blessing. It might not be immediately, but God's going to bless my effort. Paul desired to go to Rome to do those things. But the last thing, if I can do it in a minute, I'll let y'all out on the time by the Baptist hour, but it might be 2 minutes after. Paul desired to go to Rome not only to give something and to get something, but to gather something. To gather something. Look at verse 13. Now, I would not have you ignorant or unaware, brethren, that oftentimes I proposed or planned to come unto you, but my plans fell through. And here's the purpose, that I might have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. He's talking about the other Gentile New Testament churches. Paul expected to gather a spiritual harvest when he arrived in Rome. He expected that his efforts would be fruitful. Now again, he doesn't get into specifics. You know, he didn't say, I expect this, and this, and this. We don't know. We can imagine maybe it was in the form of new converts. And Paul was thinking, you know, I get to Rome and I'm going to teach these folks how to do evangelism better. I'll have an evangelism conference or something like that, and we'll even win more people to the Lord. Or maybe I'll have a growing faith type campaign or something like that, and we'll see maturity in the believers that are there now. I don't know. I have a hunch. When Paul came to town, it'd be a lot like Billy Graham, rest his soul, coming to town. You'd have revival. And you'd have folks saved. You'd have saved folks really get on fire for the Lord. You'd have revival. And I could see that happening when Paul arrived. He doesn't get into the particulars, but Paul expected to gather a spiritual harvest when he arrived at Rome. When we come to church, what do we expect? Now, I'd like to start using you a whole lot and not say we, but I'm just going to include myself because, you know what? Let me let you in on a secret. Don't tell any other preacher I said this, but we're not perfect either. We have the same struggles that everybody else does. We blow it just like everybody else does. We don't always pray like we should because we let busy things eat our time, especially an active pastor. You know, I'm retired. I don't have any excuses. But, you know, the active pastor, if you're not careful, you'll let busy work eat all your time up, and the day will be gone before you know it, and it's like, I didn't read my Bible yet. I didn't have my prayer time yet. Didn't have my quiet time with the Lord. So we're not perfect either, not by a long shot. But let me ask you this. When's the last time any of us got up on Sunday morning excited? Hurry up, I can't wait to get ready and get down to the church because God's going to show up and do something. And I don't know what it is, but I want to be there for it. Who's going to get saved today? Who's going to answer a call to ministry today? What young person is going to accept a call to the ministry today? What backslidden Christian is going to be at church today because the Holy Spirit's just drawn him there and going to recommit their life to the Lord? What's God going to do today? I don't know what it is, but listen, God's going to be there and God's going to do something. God's going to touch somebody's life by His power, and I want to see it. I can't wait to get down there and be a part of it. When's the last time we got up expecting God to show up and do something at church? Let's be honest. Now, some of you might. I thought about it this morning because I was preaching this sermon, but if I'd been preaching something else, I might not have thought about it. If you got kids at home, or maybe if you're raising grandkids, they're staying with you for the weekend, you drag them out of bed on, sometimes somebody has to drag you out of bed on Sunday morning. You drag them out of bed on Sunday morning, and you know, you sit there drinking your coffee, trying to get awake, and all of that. Next thing you know, you're running late. It's hurry up, let's go, hurry up, let's go. We can't be late. We were late last Sunday and the Sunday before that. We can't be late this Sunday. We got to go, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. You know, all that stuff. If you don't hurry up, I'm going to kill you. Well, that's going to make you late. You're not going to be on time now. You know, whatever, you know, and you're yelling at each other. You pull up in the church parking lot just yelling at each other, and you get out of the car. Well, hello, Brother Doug. Isn't it a wonderful day? And Brother Doug was doing that when he pulled up in the parking lot. Do we think about it? on a Baptist campus, a Baptist college campus, on a Monday morning, a group of preacher boys had gathered at the snack bar to have a little refreshment before classes started. And they were lamenting. See, I know a few big words. They were lamenting over the fact that they were preaching sermons in their churches on Sunday that they were getting A's on in their preaching class. But they were preaching them on Sunday and giving the invitation, and nobody was walking the aisle. Nobody was responding. In fact, folks were sitting there with their arms crossed and kind of half asleep. And they couldn't figure it out. One of their professors happened to come by and overheard their conversation. And so he interrupted, cleared his voice. They realized he was standing there, and he said, "Boys, when you give those wonderful, dynamic sermons, and you extend an invitation, do you expect anybody to walk the aisle?" Dead silence. Finally, one of them got up the nerve to speak, and he says, "To be honest, I hadn't thought about it. The others just kind of hung their heads. And the professor said, "Then that's probably the problem. You get what you expect. And if we come expecting nothing, a good chance that's what we're going to get. Nothing." You might say, "Well, I got up this morning, I expected God to do something, and, nobody walked the aisle." Well, not yet. Not yet. But we don't know who was touched by the power of God and the difference it's going to make in their lives. And sometimes you don't see it immediately, you see it later. Sometimes you don't hear it verbally, but you see it in their actions. You see it in the change in their life. Don't automatically assume because somebody didn't walk the aisle, and you came expecting that somebody would, then if you come with that expectation, don't assume that God didn't do anything. Just say, "Not yet." But He's going to. He's going to. He may be working on somebody right here, right now, this morning. Why do you come to church? Why do you come to church? Why did Paul desire to go to Rome? In order to give something? In order to give something? In order to gather something? And if we'll come to church for those very same reasons, then we'll be a blessing, we'll receive a blessing, and God will be glorified. And we'll get what we expect. Why do you come? Why do you come? Why do we come? Let's pray.